After the terrible defeat against the Reich and the death of Stalin, the head of the NKVD, Lavrenti Beria, consolidated the remnants of the Soviet Union under his securocratic rule. But not all would succumb to his rule in Perm, because in Siberia several competing governments had been formed, one of them being ours. Ruled by none other than the Marshal Zhukov himself, helped by a significant part of the Red Army staff who followed him. But isolated and alone, there isn't much hope to be found, especially not with the internal political issues and an intense Tuvan insurgency campaign being waged against us, which is not only further worsening our manpower shortage, but also causing a significant risk for a total state collapse. Despite all this, Zhukov thankfully has a plan to move forwards, and not all hope is lost, as there is still several groups of soldiers joining us from the west, fleeing Beria's reign. So it is time to deal with those Tuvans, and to our help we have Ivan Serov, who will create our very own little NKVD. But wary of turning him into another Beria, only token increases of the organization's resources were made, and we enacted legal limitations for their powers, even creating a new court system. So over time our anti-guerrilla efforts became increasingly effective, and with us winning more and more battles, the perfect opportunity arrived. Serov forced one of our Tuvan prisoners to return to the insurgency and convince its leaders to stop it before they lost. Convinced, the Tuvan leadership sent a delegation to Krasnoyarsk, where peace talks were held. After 6 hours of negotiations, the Tuvans agreed to peace, reintroducing them as citizens of our Soviet government. And so the worst internal issue of terrorism has been dealt with, which leaves the disastrous political factionalism in our Red Army ranks that has to be addressed. It stands between two factions, the Plurinational Committee, who stand for the minorities of the former Union and seek to create a plurinational union, against the sniper clique who want to unite the Soviet man into a singular idea, as they take a more traditionalist socialist stance. Now, even if Zhukov prefers the sniper clique, we were forced to accept the plurinational unification plan, as without their support ethnic conflicts could very well restart and the endless collapse continue. The first step in any unification plan is of course to strengthen our army, as without a strong one how could we even think of uniting Siberia or all of Russia? The committee's solution for our manpower shortage was simple: allow for diversity in our army, with even former Tuvan insurgencies being recruited. Meanwhile, Zhukov contacted supporters in our neighboring rival Republic of Novosibirsk and got them to defect to our side. So with all the equipment and new manpower, we started training up some more infantry divisions. While they were in training, we started the expansion of the Krasnoyarsk factories, who will support our existing military complex. At the same time, the Plurinational Committee had made connections with Chinese communist sympathizers who joined us, and they even managed to smuggle a whole tank division, outdated but still operational. And so our army is more ready than ever to begin the Great Unification War, which will start with us invading the Soviet Republic of Novosibirsk, our rivals, as their leadership had split up with Zhukov during the fleeing from Beria. As soon as we declared war, the enemy forces launched several offensives across our border, which we answered with just as many. This led to the beginning of the war being really chaotic, with both of us advancing in different regions, but as the front started to consolidate, we grouped together our tank divisions and staged a concentrated offensive towards the south. After breaking through, we threatened to encircle 2 of their divisions, but with a counterattack from the west, we had to hurry up to close it, which allowed one of them to flee. Nonetheless, after capturing 1 division, the war has started good for us, as we have inflicted 5 times higher casualties on them. So we focused all our efforts to seize their capital. While we didn't get any more encirclements on the way, we did capture Kemerovo, which opened up the road to Novosibirsk and allowed us to capture the city. Still, the Republic didn't surrender, and we had to work to capture Tomsk and Barnaul. Thankfully, the latter was unprotected, and with the first city also falling quickly after, the Novosibirsk military started to collapse until our control over the territory was total. But this is only the first step in the unification plan, and we must work quickly to continue it. Thus, we immediately integrated the Novosibirsk Politburo, which raised the question of their former general, Rokossovsky, Zhukov's biggest rival, who he wants dead. But scared for his life, he had gone into hiding, and even if we attempted to find him, he slipped past our search patrols. And this can cause huge issues for our regime, as a wild opposition general could come back anytime and haunt us. And since Zhukov's solution had failed, he was forced to accept the more pragmatic solution from Kosygin, the secretary of the party, to invite Rokossovsky back to our country, something which he accepted. Joining him, 2 Novosibirsk generals were also rehabilitated. So with the integration complete, the plan can continue, now moving north to the barren reaches of Norilsk. With the government of the region incredibly weak, the terrain was our biggest issue, which wasn't really an issue as the region was fully under our control after some weeks nonetheless. Thus, all of Central Siberia is now ours, and we declared the Siberian Soviet government. But from here the road is even rougher, being smack in the middle between our 2 stronger contenders, and with the new state to build, things will continue to be difficult. Before we can continue the unification war, there are 3 areas to handle. The industry, the factionalism which still remains though smaller, and our government which needs to move on from its small origin to a genuine and legitimate government. And through every decision on this matter, a rivalry will affect the outcome. A rivalry between Zhukov and the secretary of the party, Alexei Kosygin. The first area which would be fought over was that of the industry, with Kosygin proposing emphasis on light industry, while Antonovo, supported by Zhukov, proposed investments into our heavy industry in anticipation for the coming wars. As Zhukov stands with more power, his reforms were driven through and 2 new military factories were constructed. Kosygin could still pass some of his own economic reforms though, as he set out to restore the state-owned farms from before the collapse of the Union. After this, the factionalism in the Red Army had to hastily be addressed, as troop movements on our border with the American Puppet Republic had been noticed. So scared about the war already, Zhukov was forced to put away his military plans and stick to those already adopted, supported by Kosygin and the plurinationalists. So a more democratic decision process was put in place for the army, and even more ethnic groups were integrated into it. As these reforms were instituted, the border movements transformed themselves into border crossings as the Eastern Republic declared war. This blatant attack against us sparked the already strong hatred for this bourgeoisie republic, raising support and morale for our cause. We would immediately deploy 4 infantry divisions to hold off the larger army of the enemy, but even without them all our defenses would hold, which allows us to begin plan our own and turn to the last area to handle, that of our state. Something which the war had a huge effect on, as with our population gathering around Zhukov, he could afford to sideline Kosygin and copy the playbook of Stalin. Thus, a rule by the consensus of 1 was established, as Zhukov will now be able to steer the nation towards victory even faster. And to reach this victory, he declared the beginning of our offensives to the east, who will start in the very tight corridor between Lake Baikal and Mongolia, being supported by our own NKVD agents and sympathetic groups causing havoc between enemy lines. So let the march to Vladivostok begin. Vladivostok and the whole east is ours. And while Beria's Perm Soviet government still opposes us from the west, Zhukov, having held on to his power, declared a reformation of the original Union's government. But just because we now see us as the legitimate heir of the USSR doesn't mean the East is integrated. For this we need to convene the Politburo and begin to work even more than before, though on the same three matters. Starting once again with the economic matters, as we must quickly boost it if we want to have a chance against the Perm government. There were two plans proposed, none of them being from Kosygin of course, but from the plurinationalists and the sniper clique. Now while before the debates would be hard, as the plurinationalists had been favored during our early years, they had gained enough strength and support from Zhukov to win without a debate, in all three areas as well. The first step of the economic plan was to enact autarky, stopping trade with the capitalist world and enabling a total mobilization of our industries for war. We would also focus on the urban sector to construct more military factories at a faster pace. And a new bus factory would also further increase our industrial capabilities. But this rapid industrial expansion together with us ending imports could turn to a disaster if we run out of oil, especially during a war. So as our last economic reform and to safeguard our self-reliance, we constructed fuel silos and started researching better oil processing, which together with the construction of a second oil plant will ensure fuel safety. And now as we can let the economy boom and even surpass the Perm industry, we turn to the matters of the state. Following the plurinationalist reasoning, we would follow the founding theories of Marxist-Leninism with only slight modifications here and there. Looking back to the times of Stalin, a new Gulag system was implemented which will further help our industrial expansion. At the same time, Zhukov would also have several meetings with Serov to ensure complete unity in the party, and from these meetings an interesting question would arrive. What was the actual fate of Stalin? While we say he died in battle, no one surely knows, so to sort it all out, Zhukov sent the NKVD on an investigation. As a final state reform, a new constitution was written to ensure stability for years to come. But before we could even start on the military matters, the Perm Soviet government declared war on us. Something which might seem scary, but we are actually more than prepared. Because with our growing military industry, we've been able to deploy plenty of additional infantry divisions to reach over 500,000 deployed men. And since the Perm government also declared war on the Russian Empire, who rose up during the collapse of Moscovian and all of Germany, they seem to have bitten more than they can chew. So all of their initial offensives against us failed, and to seize this opportunity, Zhukov ordered our army to march up to the Irtysh river. Starting in the south, we met little resistance, so as we reached the river, we also decided to cross it and capture the city and supply hub of Ekibastu. Similar easy attacks occurred in the center and even in the north on the river, as the quite important city of Omsk was easily captured by our tanks. Seeing how this initial offensive had been so easy, we decided to simply continue instead of putting all our focus on further reforming our army like we had planned to. We will still conduct them of course, but reaching Perm is a far more important matter. So we took up our offensive in Omsk and continued along the Trans-Siberian Railway with the goal to reach the Ural Mountains. While we attempted to encircle some of their forces, they always slipped out, but despite this we could continue pushing. That is until we reached halfway, as the Perm forces had set up a significant defense of the supply hub of Tyumen. Thankfully this was at the same place where the railway split in two parts, so we could simply take the southern undefended road until we had reached Chelyabinsk and Sverdlovsk, both right on the eastern side of the Ural Mountains. While we could cross them right now and reach Perm in a matter of days, Zhukov instead decided to secure the north and Kazakhstan, as plenty of enemy forces in this area could stage a counter-offensive and encircle our push to the Urals. Taking control over the Kazakh offensive, Zhukov would drive our forces from Chelyabinsk south, all the way to the Aral Sea, which meant the whole Perm army defending Kazakhstan was now encircled. After capturing them and with similar successes in the north, all the territory east of the Urals lies under our control. Which means the push to the west can begin. With already 400,000 casualties, there wasn't much remaining of the Perm army, and so after our small tank force entered their capital meeting no resistance whatsoever, we launched an all-out offensive on the whole front. With still no significant defenses showing up, we pushed further and further west. So far west that the Perm government now capitulated, and we stand as the only and legitimate heir of the USSR left. But it isn't over yet. The Russian Empire still stands, controlling Moscow and former Leningrad, and that's only to unite the Russian USSR. There are even more territories we need to reconquer in order to restore the true USSR. But everything has its due time, and we will take them one by one, starting of course with recapturing Moscow. Now, despite the empire controlling the biggest cities of Russia, after the invasion of Germany, much of their industrial capabilities had been destroyed, which together with the empire having had little time for military build-up and almost already lost Moscow to the Perm forces, this war will be simple. And indeed it was, as the reactionary forces couldn't even cover the whole front, leaving our tank divisions to drive completely unopposed to Moscow and enter it. Only a few hours later, Zhukov would arrive to the city, declare it liberated and officially restore it as the capital of our Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. But the war continued on as our infantry and tanks drove further west all the way until we reached Belarus, splitting the empire's forces in two. From here we turned north until we reached Petrograd, leaving our enemy with only a few southern cities left. While these two were defended, it was far too insignificant to stop us, and so as Bryansk and Orel fell to our forces, the last Russian contender capitulated. And with that, Zhukov declared Russia reunited and the start of the efforts to restore the rest of the SSRs. While preparing our first two efforts, one in Central Asia and one to reclaim the Caucasus SSRs, we would begin the integration efforts of the Moscow area after the already successful integration of the Perm region, which had greatly increased our industry and manpower. Then, after 15 days of preparations, the SSR reconquest wars could begin. After more than a year of reclamations, only one area remains, Karelia. However, with the Finns allied with the Swedish and Danish governments, we aren't so keen for a full-scale war. Instead, we will send our diplomats to the country to simply threaten them. And it worked, as the Finnish army quickly surrendered the region, allowing us to restore our control over Karelia and Murmansk. Now, Zhukov did have a plan to strike the Republic of Poland as well, but having noticed our rapid expansions, they decided to join the Toronto Accord. And since a war with the Americans and all of Western Europe would be impossible for us to win, Zhukov decided to put the plans down. Instead, he announced the beginning of a great catch-up to the West. It included significant investments into research, like the creation of nuclear laboratories, so we too can have nuclear weapons, and a bunch of reconstruction projects across our newly conquered cities, most notably in Moskva and St. Petersburg. To spread our influence, we ratified the Treaty of Friendship, Cooperation and Mutual Assistance together with our Romanian sister Socialist Republic and began searching for further allies, like the Republic of India. And so, while our civilian economy might not be on par with the Western powers, our huge military spending together with our growing influence is set to make our reformed union into a true contender against Western capitalism. Thanks so much for watching, I hope you enjoyed the video and see you in the next one.